They found her in the wreckage of the frigate, hands still gripping a severed console panel, her uniform torn but her eyes steady. The Karesh commander tilted his crest and said humans were too fragile, too simple, their neural patterns too scattered to interface with Karesh systems. She didn't argue. She just memorized the layout of his bridge as they dragged her past it. The brig on the Karesh Dominion flagship Vel'thar smelled like burnt metal and something vaguely sweet, like charred fruit. Lieutenant Maya Santos pressed her back against the curved wall, counted the seams in the plating, 47 visible joins, and cataloged every sound beyond the force field. The low hum of the reactor 3 decks down, the clipped footsteps of the guards changing shifts every 2 hours, the faint whistle of recycled air passing through vents she couldn't see. She'd been aboard for 72 hours. They'd pulled her from the wreckage of the UNSC Gallant, a frigate that had been outgunned and outmaneuvered in the Arcturus belt. She was the only survivor. The Karesh had scanned her implants, stripped her gear, and locked her in this cell while their commander, a tall, violet-scaled officer named Thraxes, decided what to do with her. She'd seen him twice. Both times he'd regarded her the way someone might regard a broken appliance. Maya flexed her fingers. Her left wrist ached where the console panel had cut her during the frigate's final moments, but the pain was useful. It kept her sharp. The force field flickered. A guard stepped into view, his crest flared, and what she'd learned was mild irritation. He tapped a translator clipped to his chest harness. "You, human, Commander Thraxes requests your presence." She stood slowly, keeping her hands visible. "Lead the way." The corridors of the Vel'thar were wider than human ships, with high ceilings that made her feel small. The walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, and the gravity felt just slightly off, like standing on a surface tilted a few degrees. She counted turns, left, right, straight for 30 paces, left again, and memorized the placement of conduit panels and access hatches. The guard didn't speak. His scales shimmered under the ambient light, a deep indigo that reminded her of deep ocean water. They arrived at a viewport chamber. Thraxes stood with his back to her, gazing out at the star beyond. It was a young sun, bright and white, casting harsh shadows across the deck. Behind him, the bridge stretched in a semicircle, dominated by a central dais where officers interfaced directly with neural consoles. Their fingers, longer and more articulated than hers, moved in patterns she couldn't follow, their crests flickering in what she guessed was communication. Thraxes turned. His eyes were triple-lidded, each lid closing at a different speed. "Lieutenant Santos, you interest me." She didn't respond immediately. She let her gaze drift past him, cataloging the layout. 4 neural consoles at the cardinal points, a central helm station, emergency overrides along the aft bulkhead, 2 exits. "You're wondering why you're still alive," Thraxes continued. He gestured with one long-fingered hand. "Your species fascinates us, so fragile, so emotional, and yet you persist." "We're stubborn," Maya said flatly. Thraxes' crest rippled amusement, she thought. "Indeed, I've studied your military records. You were a systems engineer before the war. You designed fail-safes for UNSC reactors." She didn't confirm or deny, she just watched him. "I have a proposition," Thraxes said. "You help us understand your technology, and I will ensure you are treated well. Perhaps even return to your people when the war ends." Maya let a flicker of hope cross her face. "Not too much, just enough." "What do you want me to do?" "Explain your neural architecture, your command protocols. We believe human systems are inelegant, but they are effective. We wish to learn why." She nodded slowly. "I'd need access to a terminal and some time." Thraxes studied her for a long moment, then he gestured to one of the officers. "Escorted access, limited clearance, report anything unusual." The guard led her back through the corridors, but this time they stopped at a secondary console room, a smaller space with 3 inactive terminals and walls lined with data cores. The guard positioned himself by the door, his weapon held loosely. Maya sat at the terminal. The interface was alien, but the underlying logic wasn't. Information flowed in nested hierarchies. Commands cascaded through verification layers. She recognized the structure because she'd spent years building similar systems, just in a different language. She typed slowly at first, testing the boundaries. The system allowed her to access engineering diagnostics, nothing more. She pulled up schematics for the Vel'thar's reactor core, its power distribution grid, its life support arrays. She made small notes, asked harmless questions through the terminal's query function, and every so often glanced at the guard. He wasn't paying close attention. He was bored. Hours passed. The guard changed shifts twice. Each time, Maya reset her position, kept her movements small and unthreatening. By the time the second guard yawned and leaned against the bulkhead, she'd mapped the command pathways for the helm controls, the environmental systems, and the emergency lockdown protocols. She didn't try anything. Not yet. When Thraxes returned, he looked pleased. "You've been cooperative. This is encouraging." Maya stood. "I'm just trying to stay useful." "You will continue tomorrow," Thraxes said. "For now, return to your quarters." Back in the brig, Maya lay on the hard bench and closed her eyes. She visualized the pathways she'd seen, the nodes and relays, the way the Karesh systems prioritized helm commands over secondary functions. She thought about the star outside the viewport, its gravity well, its mass. She thought about the escape pods she'd counted on the way back, small, fast, designed for short-range evacuation. And she thought about what would happen if someone set a Dreadnought on a collision course with a sun. On the fourth day, Thraxes made a mistake. He brought her to the main bridge. "You will observe," he said, gesturing to a corner station near the aft bulkhead. "Do not touch anything, simply watch, learn. If you understand how we operate, you will be more effective in your assistance." Maya nodded and took the position he indicated. The bridge was alive with activity. Officers interfaced with their consoles, their crests flickering in rapid patterns she'd learned to interpret as urgency. A tactical display dominated the forward viewport, showing a cluster of human ships moving through the outer system. "They are attempting a supply run," Thraxes said, his tone dismissive. "Futile, we will intercept within the hour." Maya watched the display. The human ships were smaller, older models, freighters with minimal armament. They didn't stand a chance against the Vel'thar. She felt a tightness in her chest, a helplessness she couldn't afford to dwell on. Instead, she studied the helm officer. His fingers moved in loops and spirals, adjusting the Dreadnought's course in micro-increments. The neural interface translated intention into action almost instantaneously, but there was a rhythm to it, a cadence she began to recognize. When he shifted the ship's vector, he started with a broad stroke, then refined with smaller gestures. When he activated the weapon arrays, he double-tapped a node at the center of the console. She memorized it all. The engagement was brief. The Vel'thar fired once, a lance of energy that tore through the lead freighter's hull. The other ships scattered, jumping to faster than light before the Dreadnought could lock on. Thraxes' crest flattened in irritation. "Cowards," he muttered. Maya said nothing. She just watched the helm officer reset his console, watched the way the system cycled through a brief diagnostic before returning to standby. That night, Thraxes summoned her again. This time he brought her to his personal quarters, a low-ceilinged space with walls lined in woven fibers that smelled faintly of salt. He poured a pale liquid into 2 shallow bowls and offered her one. "A gesture of goodwill," he said. She accepted but didn't drink. She held the bowl and waited. Thraxes sat across from her, his crest relaxed. "You have proven yourself useful, Lieutenant. I am beginning to believe your people are more adaptable than we assumed." "We survive," Maya said simply. "Yes, survival. A crude instinct, but effective." He sipped from his bowl. "Tell me, what do you think of our ship?" Maya chose her words carefully. "It's impressive, advanced. The integration between biological and mechanical systems is something we've never achieved." "We believe the mind and the machine should be one," Thraxes said. "Your species separates them. You rely on crude interfaces, buttons, levers. It is primitive." "It works," Maya said. Thraxes' crest rippled again, amusement. "Indeed, but imagine what you could accomplish if you embraced our methods." She let a small smile touch her lips. "Maybe I will." The next morning, they moved her to a larger workspace, one with direct access to secondary helm controls. Thraxes explained it was a training station, used to familiarize junior officers with command protocols. He authorized her to run simulations, simple maneuvers, nothing critical. Maya ran the simulations. She practiced turning the ship, adjusting its velocity, cycling through diagnostic checks. The interface fought her at first. It expected neural input, the kind of direct connection Karesh pilots used. But the training mode had a fallback option, a manual override for officers whose implants were malfunctioning. She activated it. The system shifted to a tactile interface, nodes appearing on the console that responded to touch rather than thought. It was slower, clumsier, but it worked. She spent hours learning the rhythm, the sequences, the way commands cascaded through verification layers. The guard assigned to her that day was different, younger, less experienced. He watched her for the first hour, then lost interest and began scrolling through something on his personal datapad. Maya glanced at him, then back at the console. She pulled up the helm pathways, not the full system, just the emergency overrides, the protocols designed to bypass normal command hierarchies in case of catastrophic failure. She found the manual release for Helm Authority, the failsafe that allowed a non-networked officer to take control if the primary systems went offline. It required 3 verification steps: a biometric scan, a command code, and a physical key stored in a locked compartment near the primary helm station. She closed the file and returned to the simulation. That evening, Thraxes visited her workspace. He looked tired, his crest drooping slightly. "You are progressing faster than anticipated." "I'm motivated," Maya said. "Good, tomorrow I will grant you extended access. You will work directly with our helm officer. He will teach you the finer points of navigation." Maya kept her expression neutral. "I appreciate the opportunity." Thraxes nodded and left, alone again except for the guard who had fallen asleep in his chair. Maya allowed herself a slow exhale. She looked at the console, at the pathways she'd mapped, at the failsafe protocols she'd memorized. She thought about the escape pods, she thought about the star, and she thought about timing. The helm officer was named Kale. His crest was a lighter shade of violet than Thraxes's, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent years at the controls of warships. He didn't trust Maya. She could see it in the way he positioned himself between her and the primary console, but he followed Thraxes's orders without complaint. "You will observe," Kale said, his translator rendering his voice in clipped tones. "Do not interfere." Maya stood beside him, close enough to see the way his fingers danced across the neural interface. The Vel'thar was in high orbit around a mining station, its massive bulk casting a shadow across the industrial platforms below. Kale adjusted the ship's position with minute precision, keeping it aligned with the station's docking tether. She watched everything: the way he accessed the propulsion grid, the way he verified course corrections through a secondary diagnostic loop, the way he locked the helm when he stepped away for a brief break. The lock was biometric. It required his neural signature to release. Unless someone used the manual override. Maya spent 3 days working alongside Kale. She asked questions, made small observations, and slowly built a mental map of his routines. He always locked the helm when he stepped away. He always performed a diagnostic check before engaging the faster-than-light drive. He always kept the physical key, the one for the emergency override compartment, clipped to his harness. On the 4th day, the Vel'thar received new orders. They were moving to a forward position near the human-controlled Epsilon sector. The journey would take 6 hours. Kale prepared the ship, cycling through his pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. Maya stood nearby, her hands clasped behind her back. She counted the seconds between each check, memorized the sequence. Halfway through the journey, Thraxes summoned Kale to a tactical briefing. The helm officer locked the console, double-checked the biometric seal, and left. The bridge remained staffed, but the nearest officer was 3 stations away, focused on sensor data. Maya moved to the helm console. She pulled a thin piece of metal from her sleeve, a fragment she'd pried from a wall panel days ago and sharpened against the edge of her bunk. She slid it into the seam of the biometric lock, found the mechanical release beneath, and pressed. The lock disengaged. Her heart hammered, but her hands stayed steady. She activated the manual interface, the tactile overlay she'd practiced on the training station. The system resisted for half a second, then accepted the failsafe protocol. She was in. Maya pulled up the propulsion grid. She set a new course, a steep vector that would take the Vel'thar directly toward the system's star. She verified the trajectory 3 times, adjusted for gravitational drift, and locked it in. The ship began to turn. An alarm shrieked. The officer at the sensor station looked up, confusion flickering across his crest. Maya didn't wait. She sprinted toward the emergency override compartment, ripped open the panel, and grabbed the physical key Kale had left inside. She jammed it into the helm console's manual port and twisted. The helm authority transferred. Every console on the bridge flashed red. Kale burst back onto the bridge, Thraxes close behind. "What?" Maya slammed her palm against the lockdown command. Blast doors sealed the exits. She turned to face them, her back to the viewport, the star growing brighter behind her. "You said humans couldn't pilot your ships," she said, her voice steady. "You were wrong." Thraxes' crest flared. "What have you done?" "Set a course," Maya said, "for your son." Kale lunged for the console, but the lockdown held. The helm was unresponsive to his neural commands. It would only answer to the manual interface now, and Maya had the key. "You'll die with us," Thraxes hissed. Maya smiled thinly. "No, I won't." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip, something she'd stolen from the engineering diagnostics weeks ago and reprogrammed during her late-night sessions. She slotted it into the console. The escape pod nearest to the bridge unlocked. Thraxes moved toward her, but she was already running. She slid through the narrowing gap of a secondary hatch, sealed it behind her, and sprinted down the corridor. The ship shuddered as its trajectory steepened, gravity pulling sideways as the star's mass began to dominate. She reached the escape pod bay. The pod's hatch was open, its interior lit in emergency amber. She climbed inside, strapped herself in, and activated the launch sequence. Through the viewport, she saw the Vel'thar tilting, its massive hull beginning to glow as it entered the star's outer atmosphere. Officers scrambled on the bridge, their crests flaring in panic. The pod ejected. The force slammed her back into the seat, her vision graying at the edges. She sucked in a breath, forced her eyes open, and watched as the Dreadnought plunged deeper, its shields flaring and failing, its hull cracking along the seams. And then it was gone, consumed by light and heat, swallowed by the star it had orbited. Maya let out a shaky laugh. Her hands were trembling now, the adrenaline crashing through her in waves. The pod's autopilot engaged, charting a course toward the nearest UNSC signal. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Told you we were stubborn." The escape pod drifted for 18 hours before the UNSC frigate Horizon's Edge picked up its distress beacon. Maya spent those hours in a haze of exhaustion, her body finally registering the bruises, the cuts, the bone-deep fatigue she'd been suppressing for weeks. The pod's life support kept her alive, but just barely. By the time the frigate's airlock cycled open and 2 medics pulled her onto a stretcher, she was half-conscious and shivering. "We've got her," one of the medics said into her comms. "She's alive." Maya tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She managed a nod before the darkness pulled her under. She woke in the frigate's medical bay, a thin blanket draped over her and an IV line running into her arm. The walls were white and sterile, a stark contrast to the bioluminescent corridors of the Vel'thar. A nurse, young, freckled human, leaned over her with a gentle smile. "Welcome back, Lieutenant. You gave us quite a scare." Maya's voice came out as a rasp. "Did it work?" The nurse frowned. "Did what work? The Vel'thar, is it gone?" The nurse glanced toward the door, then back at Maya. "You'll want to talk to the captain. I'll let her know you're awake." Captain Alara Moss was a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She pulled a chair up beside Maya's bed and sat down with a weary sigh. "Lieutenant Santos, I've read your file. You were listed as KIA after the Gallant went down." "I got better," Maya said. Moss allowed a faint smile. "So it seems. The debris field we found near the Arcturus star confirms your story. The Vel'thar is gone, completely destroyed, no survivors." Maya closed her eyes. Relief washed over her, so intense it made her chest ache. "Good." "How did you do it?" Moss asked. "Karesh dreadnoughts are supposed to be impossible to hijack. Their neural interfaces, they have failsafes," Maya interrupted. "Manual overrides for catastrophic failures. I spent weeks learning their systems, memorizing their protocols. They thought I was harmless. They thought I was too simple." Moss leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "You turned their flagship into a projectile, aimed it at their own star. That's unprecedented." "They underestimated us," Maya said. "They keep underestimating us." "Maybe," Moss stood. "We're heading back to Titan Station. You'll be debriefed, probably decorated, and then, if you're smart, you'll take some leave. You've earned it." Maya nodded, but she didn't feel like celebrating. She felt hollow, like she'd spent everything she had and there was nothing left to refill the emptiness. She thought of the officers on the Vel'thar, the ones who died when the ship plunged into the star. She thought of Thraxes, his crest flaring in panic as the hull began to crack. She didn't regret it, but she felt the weight of it. The days that followed blurred together. The Horizon's Edge docked at Titan Station, and Maya was transferred to a military hospital for further evaluation. The debriefing sessions were exhausting, hours of questions from intelligence officers, tactical analysts, engineers who wanted to understand exactly how she'd bypassed Karesh security. She answered every question, repeated the story until it felt like reciting lines from a script. They gave her a medal. She accepted it without smiling. On the 6th day, she was granted leave. She packed her few belongings, the clothes the UNSC had issued her, a new datapad, a pair of worn boots, and left the hospital without fanfare. Titan Station was crowded, its corridors packed with soldiers and civilians, its air thick with the smell of recycled oxygen and fried food. Maya found a small cafe near the outer docking ring and sat by the viewport. The view overlooked Saturn's rings, their icy fragments glittering in the distant sunlight. She ordered coffee, real coffee, not the synthetic stuff the Karesh had served, and cradled the cup in both hands. A man sat down across from her. He was older, his uniform marked with the insignia of a logistics officer. He didn't say anything at first. He just sipped his own coffee and gazed out at the rings. "You're Lieutenant Santos," he said eventually. Maya glanced at him. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you. Everyone does. You're the one who flew a Karesh Dreadnought into their sun." She looked away. "It wasn't about glory." "I know," the man said. "It was about survival. About making sure they couldn't use that ship to kill more of us." Maya didn't respond. The man stood. "For what it's worth, thank you. My daughter was on one of the freighters the Vel'thar intercepted." She made it out. "Because of what you did, they didn't come after her convoy." He left before Maya could reply. She sat alone for a long time, staring at the rings, at the stars beyond. The weight in her chest didn't lift, but it shifted, became something she could carry. She thought about the gallant, about the crew she'd lost. She thought about the Karesh officers who'd treated her like a curiosity, a broken thing to be studied. And she thought about the escape pod, about the moment she'd ejected and watched the Dreadnought burn. She wasn't sure what came next, but she knew she'd survived. 3 months later, Maya stood on the observation deck of the UNSC cruiser Resolute Dawn, watching a convoy of supply ships move through the outer belt of the Epsilon sector. She wore a new uniform, crisp and clean, with lieutenant commander's bars on her collar. The promotion had been a surprise, though her commanding officer had insisted she'd earned it. "You rewrote the manual on Karesh vulnerabilities," Colonel Briggs had said during the ceremony. "Every ship in the fleet is studying your methods. You've given us a fighting chance." Maya hadn't known how to respond. She just nodded and accepted the new rank. Now she watched the convoy with a critical eye. The freighters moved in tight formation, their escorts, small, fast frigates, flanking them on all sides. It was the kind of operation that would have been suicide a year ago when the Karesh controlled most of the outer systems. But the destruction of the Vel'thar had shifted the balance. The Karesh were more cautious now, their fleets pulling back to defend core territories. "Thinking about hijacking another Dreadnought?" a voice asked beside her. Maya turned. Commander Jamal Reed stood with his arms crossed, a faint smile on his face. He was her second in command, a tactical officer who transferred to the Resolute Dawn specifically to work with her. "Just making sure they get through," Maya said. "They will," Jamal said. "The Karesh are too busy licking their wounds to stage another ambush. You rattled them." Maya didn't reply. She turned back to the viewport, to the convoy slipping past the outermost asteroids. "You know, the crew talks about you," Jamal continued. "They call you the Sun Runner, the one who turned a Karesh flagship into a comet." Maya grimaced. "I didn't ask for a nickname." "You never do," Jamal said, "but you've got one anyway, and people respect it. They respect you." She wanted to argue, to say she'd just done what needed to be done, that anyone else would have done the same, but she knew it wasn't true. She'd gambled everything on a plan that should have failed, and somehow it had worked. "I'm just trying to keep us alive," she said quietly. Jamal nodded. "That's all any of us can do." The convoy passed out of visual range. Maya stayed at the viewport for another hour, watching the stars, the distant glow of Saturn's rings, the patrol ships moving through their routes. She thought about the Karesh, about Thraxes and Kale, and the officers who died when the Vel'thar burned. She thought about the freighter pilot's daughter, the one who'd survived because the Dreadnought hadn't chased her convoy. She thought about the weight she carried, the lives saved and the lives lost. When she finally left the observation deck, she didn't go to her quarters. She went to the engineering bay, where a small team was working on retrofitting human ships with hybrid interfaces, systems that combined neural input with manual overrides, inspired by her experience on the Vel'thar. One of the engineers, a woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka, looked up as Maya entered. "Commander. Didn't expect to see you down here. I wanted to check on the progress," Maya said. Yuki gestured to a console where a prototype interface glowed softly. "It's coming along. We're still working out the kinks, but the concept is sound. If this works, we'll be able to adapt Karesh technology without relying on their biology." Maya stepped closer, studying the interface. It looked nothing like the neural consoles she'd seen on the Vel'thar, but the underlying logic was similar. Command pathways that cascaded through verification layers. Failsafes that allowed manual input when the primary systems failed. "Will it give us an edge?" Maya asked. "Maybe," Yuki said, "but it's your edge. You figured out how to turn their strength into a weakness. We're just building on what you started." Maya allowed a faint smile. "Then keep building. We'll need every advantage we can get." She left the bay and made her way back to her quarters. The room was small, just a bunk and a desk and a narrow viewport that looked out at the stars. She sat at the desk and pulled up a message on her datapad, a letter from the daughter of the logistics officer she'd met on Titan Station. The girl had written to thank her, to say she was studying engineering now, inspired by Maya's story. Maya read the letter twice, then set the datapad aside. She lay down on the bunk and stared at the ceiling, at the faint hum of the ship's reactor vibrating through the walls. She thought about the future. About the war that still stretched ahead, the battles yet to be fought. About the Karesh who were still out there, regrouping, planning their next move. And she thought about the escape pod, about the moment she'd watched the Vel'thar fall into the star. She'd survived. And she'd keep surviving for as long as it took. Outside the viewport, the stars burned steady and cold, endless and indifferent, but Maya didn't feel small beneath them. She felt grounded, rooted in the knowledge that she'd done something impossible, something that mattered. The convoy was safe. The Karesh were retreating, and somewhere out there in the dark between the stars, humanity was still fighting. Maya closed her eyes and let sleep take her, the hum of the ship a lulling rhythm that carried her into dreams of open skies and distant horizons. Tomorrow there would be new missions, new challenges, new risks, but tonight she rested.